Now I would like to give the floor to Louise Richardson, and be aware that the 8 Europe platform is now leading a stakeholder coalition of, I think, 40 networks that will help the Commission and the colleagues in DG Employment in particular to implement the European Year 2012. So thank you already for your commitment, your engagement, and you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is it's not just, you know, the year of volunteering and then sashaying into the year of older people. As I say, age has been part of the year of volunteering, but prior to that, also very involved in the year of social inclusion and anti-poverty in 2010. And we see it all as part of a spectrum going through 2013 active citizenship to gain momentum towards that big 2020 goal of achieving an EU that will be age-friendly. And I think at this stage I want to reiterate what it's heartened me very much to hear things being redefined, okay? But when we talk about age-friendly, we're not talking about being friendly for people of older age. We're talking about being friendly for people of all ages. And indeed, everything that age does is for all ages, but just to ensure that people of older age are treated equally within that spectrum, okay? So that's just to put it into a certain context. There are other things that have been said which have heartened me greatly as well. Sorry, where do I pop this out? What do I...
Do it here. We'll see if it works.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so how did we get down to that one?
Next one? Previous is here.
Is that this first slide there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Next.
Right, we move on to the next one, okay. Yeah, so the first thing I'd like to say is that AGE has been working very, very strongly with both the European Parliament and the European Commission on EU 2012, so that we link it very, very visibly during 2011. And this was sort of shown in September of this year, when the Intergroup on Ageing agreed on a manifesto in an event in the Parliament in September. And this manifesto, sorry, should I say resolution? I get a little confused between my resolutions, my manifestos, and such like, but you'll bear with me indeed on that one. This was a resolution on the importance of involving older people in volunteering activities. And indeed, it mentioned the fact that although 74% of older people indicate that they would like to get involved in volunteering when they retire, in actual fact it is a much smaller number who do so, okay? So, I mean, we wonder, what is that? What are the barriers that are preventing people from doing what they intend to do? And I think that's something which needs to be looked into. The other thing that they pointed out in this manifesto is that currently 5% of GDP in our national economies comes from volunteering, which is the equivalent of 20.8 million full-time jobs. And I think there has been a number of speakers previously who have mentioned about this thing, that we must be careful that kind of volunteering is seen as volunteering, that it doesn't take away from jobs, but equally that volunteering is valued for what it actually contributes to society as a whole. It's not simply the benefits that come to individual people, great and all as they may be, but it is very, very important to the community, but also to society, and indeed, as we see from the economy. The resolution by the Intergroup on Ageing also felt it was extremely important to build on the synergies of 2010 and 2011, and to recognise that volunteering is an essential part of active ageing and healthy ageing, and does increase solidarity between the generations. And again, I want to reiterate what was coming across in some talks yesterday, that there is frequently a lot of emphasis on younger volunteers. And while it is quite clear, and everybody's agreed, that if you start volunteering young, you most probably will volunteer for the rest of your life, there is a tendency to have young and old. There's also the tendency that Clara's already mentioned here, to see older people as the recipients of volunteering and not as the participants. And that's something that we really want to change during 2012, and see older value the worth of their volunteering, and also to show the benefits that they get from that in terms of active aging as well. But the other point that was beginning to seep out yesterday is when we talk about older volunteers, somehow of active older volunteers, somehow or another, it seems to be what I would call soft volunteering, that of older people doing nice things with our grandchildren, I mean, or going into schools to teach them how to knit, or to work with sort of transition year students to find out how to use iPads or something, None of which, by the way, I'm criticizing in any way, and I think it's very worthy and I think it's very important. But we mustn't forget the middle generation, because they weren't really talked about much at all when we talk about intergenerational solidarity. Somehow we look at it from various points of view, sometimes primarily economic, but we think of it as the very old, the grandparents' generation working with school children and below, with small children. But in actual fact, intergenerational solidarity means exactly what it says. It means solidarity between all the generations. And I think that sort of middle generation, post-school children, right up to grandparenthood at whatever age. I became a grandparent at 42, so I didn't consider myself very old in actual fact. But I mean, between that and the third age, whatever that may be, we mustn't forget that. And I'll give you one or two examples just a little bit later. The other thing, that this manifesto does is that it indicates very strongly what can be done, the recommendations made to the EC at national level, calling on the member states and calling on the Eurostat as well, on what can be done to increase volunteering among older people during 2012. I think we can move on. There we are. Okay, I've said all that. Next one, yeah. So also on that same day, AGE launched a position paper on active ageing through older volunteering, and making the link between 2011 and next year. One of the things perhaps that is the strongest thing in this is that there has to be a more politically strategic approach to volunteering in 2012. And also not only the recognition of the value of volunteering by older people, but also how it really is interlinked with active ageing, and that it is strategically good in terms of having a good prospects for people as they age, to get them involved in volunteering, and obviously at all ages. The other thing, while there has been good work done by obviously Euro Foundation, we would really, really like to see data accumulated throughout the Union on the volunteering that older people do, and the value that that has. And also, to actually have targets, within the countries, to targeted support, I feel, to ensure that the barriers are identified and removed throughout that. Another thing that was mentioned yesterday, and there was some discussion in question time, was the idea of passports, for mobility. And really we would also call for that facility and ability for older volunteers to be able to move throughout the Union. And also perhaps this could be done with a greater emphasis maybe on the Grundtvig programme for older volunteers. But a Europe Pass, not quite what was being discussed yesterday, is not really what we had in mind. It was more that people's skills would be listed and that they would be transferable. But I think these are things that can be worked out during 2012. Right, that's a quote that Anne-Sophie made to our Director General during that event, saying, of course, that as life expectancy goes up, that active ageing should be encouraged, and that everybody should be able to volunteer regardless of what their age is. Sorry. Now, obviously, it was mentioned, Sophie mentioned at the beginning about the objectives of 2012, to promote active ageing through employment, to promote active ageing in the community through volunteering and caring, and promote healthy ageing and independent living, and also intergenerational solidarity. Clara also mentioned, the fact of unpaid work being part of what the Euro Foundation have looked at. And it is sort of one of the things that a lot of people who perhaps would volunteer are tied up with caring duties. And of course, I mean, caring is not volunteering in that it's not a choice, but it is, takes up a lot of people's time, and it is in a way benefiting the community in a great way. So it is something I don't think that can be totally separated, and I think you would agree with that about it. We've mentioned how active ageing is very much part of the volunteering spectrum, at least to enable people to age well, and to also, I think, overcome social exclusion. I mean, this is one of the greater things that as people get older. But one of the things that needs to be done, particularly for people who haven't been involved in volunteering, is to have that information, to have an ambience which enables people to transition, you know, from their lives, particularly, say, women who've been working in the home, whose life circumstances may have changed. It can be quite difficult for people to break into a sort of a culture of volunteering where people have been involved for many years. So that needs to be, I think, addressed as well. I want to give just a couple of examples of volunteering, some of which have already been given, but is to try and move away from that attitude that I've spoken about of older people doing nice, comfortable things with grandchildren, which, by the way, I love doing with my own grandchildren, of whom I have very many, okay? But I mean, I would say it's very important. But I think also that we have to realise that older people have a tremendous amount to give. They have their life's experience, they have the skills and the training that they have got throughout life, and I mean, there's no reason why the community shouldn't benefit from that. And I think there are sort of different levels of volunteering. Perhaps the one level, first of all, would be the sort of volunteering where training is required, yeah. And that would be things like where people are support, say in bereavement support for people who have died from cancer or from suicide. And then one of the recipients today mentioned about having helplines, very successful senior helplines, where there's peer-to-peer support given by trained volunteers. I'll just give one example and then I'll finish, okay? It's, I think also older people can be very good at being innovative, and this is something they don't often get credit for, and something which we're looking for throughout 2012. One of the examples I'll give is an Irish one, which is called Fáilte Isteach, which is the Irish for welcome in, and it was started in a small village in Ireland where the people there, at the height of our economic boom, where we had many immigrants coming in, realised that while the children were going to school and a lot of the men were working, many of the women were in actual fact not integrated into the community and didn't have English, and were having to get the children to help them to do the shopping and to get medical advice, etc. So they set up a system with the help of primary school teachers as well, of having conversation classes. But of course, it was much, much more than conversation classes. It was actually where people were integrated into the community and where the mainly older volunteers were actually learning a lot from the culture from other people. So I just give that as an example. It is now just the 50th centre is opening shortly, and it has been replicated in New York with the Irish community there helping out some of the newer communities, and it's something which could be replicated, I think, virtually throughout Europe. But it's a very, very interesting project and has actually won a lot of innovation awards and support. So I'll sort of finish there. I mean, there will be time later on. I think most of my other slides are about 2012 and what you can do in the coalition about it. But there are booklets outside about 2012, and I'm sure there will be some time in questions if anybody has any queries. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Louise.